Senator McKenna, who is on the line, and we want to acknowledge her, and we want to acknowledge our wonderful, wonderful Commissioner Brooke. We are so lucky to have both of them on this call and in our county. So thank you for turning out for us today. We're so happy to have you. And next, I want to talk to you. I'm going to introduce you to Erica Gallegos of OLE. OLE New Mexico is a nonprofit grassroots member organization of working families that has been working together since 2009 to strengthen communities using issue-based campaigns and electoral engagement. So Erica is going to talk to us a little bit about OLE and what it is that they do. And then we're going to hear from our very own Karen Schaefer about some work that she has been spearheading in the county. So without further ado, Erica, if you would take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for inviting me here to share with you the work that we do at OLE, and the work that our members are leading on the ground. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a little presentation here. Can you all see that? Okay. So, as Alex shared, OLE is a nonprofit grassroots org. We've got a C3 and a C4, so we engage members of the community both in issue-based campaigns as well as electoral engagement to ensure that working families are playing a critical role in shaping New Mexico's future. And so in doing that, we're centering the experiences of people of color, early educators, parents, workers, immigrants, and we create a space for people to grow their leadership and create lasting change in New Mexico. We believe that at the forefront of our work, leading our work with staff, supporting from behind, that members of the community should be at the forefront. And so at this last session, legislative session, we had many members showing up, sharing their stories, showing up virtually, obviously, sharing their stories. And so I'll get a little bit more into that. So the priority issue areas that we really focus on at OLE include early education, so that's access for parents of young children, which I am one of. As a matter of fact, I have a wonderful childcare provider who my daughter is with right now, so I can be with you all. So just want to give her a shout out because she's wonderful. And it also, we also focus on working with childcare providers, teachers in the classroom who make poverty wages and don't have benefits. And so they are at the forefront of our work. As a matter of fact, one of our members is on the Early Ed Secretary's Advisory Council. Then another issue area that is a priority at OLE is democracy reform. So ensuring that voting is accessible and especially for people of color in our community. A third issue area that we work on is workers' rights. And so that's anything from paid sick leave, which was one of our main issues this legislative session. It could be just really, again, the workers leading that work, but ensuring that they've got a safe and respected workplace, essentially, or that they are respected in the workplace. And then a fourth issue area that we prioritize is immigration, immigrant rights. We also have a lawyer on staff that works with folks who are wanting to become citizens. And so we do a lot of that work in the immigrant community. So with those four main issue areas in mind, this legislative session, we actually took on a lot of issues, or a lot of legislation rather. And so the first being that we worked really hard to pass House Bill 20, which is paid sick leave. That was sponsored by Angelica Rubio as one of the sponsors. And this really allows for any worker in New Mexico to gain 1 hour of paid leave for every 30 hours worked, up to 64 hours annually. And workers will begin to accrue time starting July 1st of next year. So this is an issue that we've been working on for the last 5 years in Albuquerque, and we decided this legislative session to take it to the state legislature, especially because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And many of the members that we were talking to were being told by their employer that even if they did test positive for COVID, they still needed to go to work. Or they were afraid to go to, or rather they were afraid, yes, they were afraid to go get tested in the first place, even though they had multiple symptoms, because they knew that they would have to stay home without pay. And so that's why we decided to really focus on this piece of legislation this last session. In regards to early education, I'm sure all of you are well aware of the Early Education Constitutional Amendment. We've been in the fight to pass this piece of legislation for the last 10 years. And this year was the year that we were able to get it out of the legislature. It's going to allow for $125 million in additional funds to go to early education services in our state. And it will be on the November 2022 ballot for voters to approve. And we will continue to work to ensure that our members are at the table when decisions are being made about how that money will be spent, so that it increases access for parents as well as increases wages for early educators. Another issue that we focused on, as I mentioned before, was democracy reform. Unfortunately, none of these pieces of legislation passed, so will be added again in future sessions. And so the legislation that we focused on was automatic voter registration, protecting same-day voter registration, which we were able to do, felony disenfranchisement for those returning citizens to make it easier for them to vote, 16 and 17-year-olds voting, paid legislature, and then fusion voting. And fusion voting is not an issue that I actually am very familiar with, but if you all have questions, I can get back to you all on that particular issue. And then there's just other things that we worked on that were important to our members. The first being a just transition to renewable energy, that's Senate Bill 112. And that legislation sets up a council made up of many community members, so that, again, our members are at the table when decisions are being made, as we transition to renewable energy, to ensure that people of color are prioritized in the jobs and training that will come with that transition as well. And then the second being Senate Bill 317, which is the Healthcare Affordability Act. And that was just another issue that we prioritized this session. And then there's just a whole long list of other pieces of legislation that are important to our members that we were happy to see pass. Minimum wage for high school students was repealed. So before this session, high school students had a separate lower minimum wage. We were able to get that repealed. Repeal of the abortion ban, Patients Debt Collection Protection Act, hair discrimination, inspired by the Crown Act, Civil Rights Act, Black Education Act, No Citizen citizenship proof for occupational license, which means that New Mexicans who receive a professional degree can actually get a license to practice things like, oh gosh, it just left my mind. Yeah, so in essence, they can stay in New Mexico and pursue their profession. Providing eligibility for a state or local health benefit to certain non-citizens, Native American polling place protection, and then of course, Community Solar Act. So how might you all get involved in the work that we are doing? So first of all, in November 2022, the Early Ed Constitutional Amendment will be on the ballot. So please make sure of course, there's going to be a whole lot happening in November 2022, but it's going to be on the back of the ballot. So we're trying to get that in people's minds now to make sure you turn over your ballot and vote in favor of that constitutional amendment. You can also follow us on social media. You can also donate to OLE. And so at our website, there's this button up top that says donate. There's also this link here that says join the fight, and you can go there and share your information with us to sign up for our email blasts, which is really where we share just actions you can take, various different ways that you can get involved with our work at OLE.
That's great. So I had a few questions for you, Erica. One of them is about the Early Childhood Education Act, that amendment that we're voting on next year. So we're going to want to I'll sign up for the newsletter, but we're going to want to push that out through our social media so we can help you all, because that's really important. I do have a quick question, and I believe I know the answer, but I don't know if everybody else does, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Where does the funding come from for the early childhood education?
For this particular constitutional amendment, or just overall, where
overall, where are they going to get money to help pay for that for the state?
To help pay for early education in New Mexico. So yes, the way that New Mexico pays for early childhood education currently is through our general fund, but also through federal funds, through something called the CCDBG, Child Care and Development Block Grant. So it's a huge grant that comes into our state, millions of dollars that we use. However, there's currently about a $400 million funding gap. And so that's why we were pursuing the constitutional amendment so it's gonna do two things. It's gonna allow for $125 million of renewable, sustainable, dependable funding, right? And secondly, we're going to be the first state in New Mexico to ratify access to early childhood education in our Constitution, which is a huge thing. And the reason that we see that as so important is because mostly women, not only women, but mostly women, and mostly women of color, who are helping us raise our children and get them ready for their educational career, right? Setting those educational foundations. It's a matter of respect for them, right? Ratifying that in the Constitution.
Okay, great, thank you. I've been seeing a lot of things on social media where people are saying, people don't want to work. There are jobs for $12 an hour and nobody wants to work because they're getting handouts from the state. What is a proper response to something like that?
Well, we're living through a pandemic, and many people with underlying conditions that are being called quote unquote lazy are actually afraid to go back to work. And not only that, we've seen through the legislative session that, we had 5 hours of testimony just for paid sick leave for one hearing. People realized their power and they are demanding better working conditions. And so $12 an hour is still a poverty wage.
That's it.
And so at the end of the day, workers are expecting more from employers.
Great, thank you. Because that's just a right-wing talking point that I see rear its ugly head every day lately. And it's frustrating because we know people can't live off of that anymore, right? Maybe 20 years ago, but no longer. Are there any other questions from the group?
I have a follow-up to your question, Alex, and that is to what extent, from your experience, do you think that lack of childcare right now, or childcare that's too expensive, is keeping people, especially women, out of the labor force right now?
Well, there was a study that came out in regards to women who are unable to work through the pandemic, saying that the reason is lack of childcare. In New Mexico, parents who pay out of pocket pay more than a third of their income for childcare. And if that's a single parent, a single mom trying to work and they need a place for their child to go, she's not able to also pay rent or other expenses. So I would say it is absolutely a factor as to why especially women have not been able to go back into the workforce.
Thank you.
Senator McKenna, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Gallegos, thank you so much for your advocacy the past session. When you were talking about those bills, it was coming back to me, all those memories. About HJR1, the Early Childhood Permanent Fund. I'm thinking back, here we are, May, getting ready for November. And what does OLE think? How much education are we going to have to do for our voters that they vote yay? I'm just getting a bit concerned that opposition will permeate some voters' minds. And I just want to do whatever I can and ensure that our voters are educated about that bill. Has OLE thought about that?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for your question. So we think about it every day. So I personally started my organizing career, I started 10 years ago on this issue. And so with that, I will say, this issue has been at the forefront of New Mexicans' minds for the last 10 years. So in my mind, one more year isn't going to, I think, do a whole lot of damage, right, in regards to how people view early education. Now, we haven't seen yet a huge concerted effort to like an anti-effort to get people to vote against it. However, that doesn't mean it won't happen, right? We want to be prepared for that. And so, and the other thing I will say is that we do have a poll that shows that there is bipartisan support for early education, and particularly for HJR1, and that's more than 80% of Dems, more than 70% of Republicans. And so we are going into this next year to absolutely, as an organization, lead on the effort to ensure that it passes. I mentioned that we have a C4, we have a year-round canvas that pre-pandemic would go door to door, but we've got about 10 folks that are specifically a canvas team that's calling voters every single day. So we've got a machine at OLE in many ways. And so those are some of the things that it's absolutely at the forefront of our mind, and we'll definitely be leading on it within the coalition to ensure that it passes.
Very good, thank you. And just as an aside, when I did my polling running for this seat last year, education was way the heck up there for Senate District 9, very important. And regardless of party affiliation.
Thank you for sharing that, Senator.
Erica, I think that the Republicans are going to go berserk over this issue, as we already know. And I think that Albuquerque Journal has already indicated that they're going to come out against it. I'm curious to know if you could share with us any plans for coalitions that already exist on this issue, or any plans to add additional organizations.
Yes, thank you for your question. So I would say in the last 10 years, there's been a coalition of organizations called Invest in Kids Now that has worked together to ensure that HJR1 passed out of the legislature. Now, Invest in Kids Now it is continuing to ensure that it passes the voters, right? That we have a hefty educational campaign on the ground, ensuring that it passes. The other thing I will say is that I think many people saw the writing on the wall this legislative session, including 2 Republicans in particular who voted in favor of HJR1 to pass out of the House. So for what it's worth, I agree that Republicans are going to come out against, and that Albuquerque Journal has always been against this issue and many others. And so I definitely believe that there will be an organized anti-campaign. But I think that we can, point at the fact that it came out of the House at least as a bipartisan issue.
How does an organization that does exist become involved in Invest in Kids now?
I'm sorry, can you ask your question again?
How does an organization that already exists, how would they become involved with Invest in Kids Now?
Well, I can share the website. You can sign up for their newsletter, but as far as becoming an active participant in the coalition, I can connect you all with the person that really runs the coalition. And the main sort of director, if you will, of that organization is St. Joe's. And Jessa at St. Joe's. If you all are familiar with Jessa, she's really great. She was also one of the main expert witnesses for that legislation during the session. So I can get contact info over in order for you all to inquire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be great. Erica, I just want to point out that one of our leaders in the county is Deb Dobson, and she is the president of the Sandoval County Federation of Democratic Women. Early childhood education is certainly a women's issue. So, and I'm sure that they will come out in support. And also there's a state organization with the president, Clara Padilla. It's New Mexico Federation of Democratic Women. So that's another group that you can turn to for support to help mobilize people to vote yes for this important amendment. And we're very, very grateful to you for coming. Are there any more questions before I move on? We good? So Erica, thank you so much for coming.
Chris
We
has a
appreciate-
question.
Oh, Chris, I'm so sorry.
I just quickly have a question. I'm pretty new to the area. Albuquerque Journal, did they say why they're against this?
Well, they haven't blatantly yet said we are against it, but their editorials are sort of leaning that way right now. What, we should consider this, and maybe this won't work quite right, and that sort of thing. They haven't yet come out and said, vote no.
Sounds like I should be trying to write a letter to the editor to them in my writings.
Sure.
Definitely.
I'll have to go online and find out what their spiel is and try to refute it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. In the past, during session, whenever this issue has come up for a vote at the legislature, the Journal has come out against it. So that's an indication that they'll do the same during during leading up to the vote with the voters. And so, but yeah, I don't know that they've necessarily said this is why we're against it, but as Karen said, they definitely indicate, that they will be against.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So, and Chris, when you do your research and write your letter, make sure to share it with us so we can share it with everyone also. So Erica, thank you so much for coming today and speaking to us about OLE. We're very happy that you could make it, and you are awesome and amazing, and continue to fight the good fight, and we're going to be there with you. So thank you. And don't forget, everybody, to please donate if you are able to OLE New Mexico. And the website, Erica, one more time.
I'll drop it into the chat.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you very, very much.
If any other questions come up as well. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. Wonderful. So next we have our very own Karen Schaefer, who spearheaded the Feed Rio Rancho Kids effort for us, and who is going to report on her work and being liaison to help the asylees down at the border. So take it away, Karen.
Okay, thank you, Alex. My clock is going to go off in a minute, and I won't be able to mute, but I may mute just long enough for it to strike 12 times. In 2019, a church friend introduced me to Francis House Catholic Worker in Albuquerque, and the work that they do at the border. Now, they run a soup kitchen and a place to enjoy snacks and visit with people and pick up clothing for kids and toys and diapers, etc. But two of their founders also make 2 trips a month to El Paso. And their next trip will be May the 19th. They are particularly right now looking for various sizes of baby diapers and 10-gallon and 33-gallon bags and shampoo and men's shorts or slacks, as long as they are size 34 or below. However, you don't have to worry about the May 15th deadline, because they go all the time. You all know that there is a desperate need at the border for help, and we have been very impressed with the work that Francis House Catholic Worker and others have done. Since we first began supporting this work at the border, we have raised more than $4,000 and gathered literally a garage full of clothing and other items to be sent down there. And another member who's on this call, Kitty Perez, can attest to that, because she helped me sort all of it. Anyone interested in providing any of the above items or a cash donation now or in the future, just let me know. Maybe you just have questions and you don't want to go into it right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions and tell you how you can donate with a check or donate online or provide items. So I will put my email in the chat, and I hope to hear from you, and I appreciate your consideration. And if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to try to answer.
So Karen, I have a question that I've heard several times, and so I'm going to ask it. I think I know the answer, but in the past, when during the Trump administration, when people were being detained and then just dumped and let loose at the border with no means of anything, with no money, no clothing, sometimes no shoes, no belts, nothing. They were being turned loose without help, and people were being brought up here to our area. We had people in Rio Rancho that we helped. Is there a possibility for Albuquerque or Rio Rancho or any other area close by to receive asylees again? And is that going to be possible for us to help up here again?
Not to my knowledge, Alex. That doesn't mean that it's not being considered somewhere. These people are very interested in the folks who arrive with just what you said. And then, just a minute. they not only take away their shoestrings and their belts, they also take away their medicine. And so the two organizations that Catholic Francis House Catholic Worker take funding and items to are busy meeting those kinds of needs, establishing places for the people that are at the border to sleep, establishing schooling for the kids. I mean, they are doing an amazing job with relatively small amounts of money and a lot of donations. So there was a plan, some of you may have read about it, about sending asylees to a camp here in New Mexico, and then at the last minute, they didn't do that. So I don't know where they are sending them now, but to the best of my knowledge, there are no plans for New Mexico.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I did have a comment. And thank you, Karen, for all you're doing. But for some of you on the east side, you may know that there is a group over here working on the same and in coordination. So I know they do a lot of their packing up on Tuesdays at the Presbyterian Church here in Placitas. So if you don't get a huge response out of this area, it may be because some of those resources are still getting there, but they're being funneled through a group of women primarily that are working on this issue at the church in the community.
Well, thank goodness there are many organizations working on it. And I will tell you that we have gotten an amazing response. I sent out a note to about 12 people and said, we need to raise $1,000 so they can buy KN95 masks. And as a result of that appeal, friends of friends and friends of friends of friends, we raised over $4,000. So there is a huge, huge need, and people understand it and they do want to help.
Mm-hmm. I guess my point was, I didn't want you to think that there was a lack of support on this particular issue out of this part of the county. It's just that we've got a different group that have been soliciting those resources locally, or
Right.
a little more locally. Thank you.
Great. Any more questions or comments? Oh, Senator, yes, please.
Actually, Naomi's hand was up. I'll go after Naomi. Thank you.
Okay,
Oh,
Naomi.
thank you. Oh, thank you, Brenda. I'm and I know that the church is a private organization, but you all know I have a stand for separation of, I don't ever like to have an agenda be, we will bring you this if there's something in return. So I got clear with Karen, if this is a concern of yours, it may not be, I know it's very controversial, but I was concerned that if they help out it's a church organization in both cases, both the East and then the one that Karen is with. My concern was that then they would have to proselytize, or when they have the camp for the children, there would be religious studies. Karen assured me that is not the case. So I just wanted to put that out in the space.
Thank you, Naomi.
You're welcome.
Naomi, when we were working with the refugees that were coming into Rio Rancho with Catholic Charities, it was a stipulation that we could not proselytize.
Oh, interesting. That's great. And
right.
What
and
we do,
Catholic Charities. And Catholic Charities, okay, it's a religious organization, but they have been pretty good at being, having trucks loaded and ready and, to go to help people in all kinds of disasters. So
I'm very clear that churches are where the money is, and it's a great place to have there be contributions. My own brother-in-law was helped by Catholic Charities.
There you go.
And I'm very clear about the advantages.
Was really, really been, helpful too.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, thank you
for letting me.
Going on, but they shut it down. So
great. Okay, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Karen, Kitty, way to go. Really proud of your efforts. is there a place I can take a look at that need list that you mentioned, Karen?
Yes, I will send you an email.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Well, that's great. So just a few things, a few housekeeping items. We are looking at possibly having First Friday outdoors in June, but we're not 100% sure yet. So please keep your eyes peeled for information about that on our website, especially and via social media. And we are thinking about possibly getting back to Matucci's in June. It of course depends on a lot of stuff, but right now, since we're in the turquoise, we can meet in groups of 140 or below. So a group meeting at Matucci's would certainly fall into that, and an outdoor meeting would be the safest of all. So, and if you are not vaccinated, we're going to encourage you to continue to wear your mask and be safe, and to get vaccinated if at all possible. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for our guest speakers, Erica Gallegos and Karen, our very own Karen Schaefer. Thank you so much. And are there any other comments, or are we good? Are we done for today? All right. Well, thank you so much for turning out, and we'll see you at second Saturday, first Friday, and then second Saturday in June. Thank you very much for all you do. You're great Democrats. Bye.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
So I had dinner